Hello and welcome to the JW Thoughts channel. My name is Wally and we are back for part 2 of looking at the new light coming from Watchtower. I'm a very serious person and this is going to be a serious video, so we're going to not waste any time and get right into it, man. Run the intro.
Round 2, fight!
Alright, we are picking up where we left off in that same Watchtower, and we are on to study Article 40. So, looking down at the preview for this one, we have this. This article provides an adjustment in our understanding with regard to the great educational program described at Daniel 12, 2 and 3. We will examine when this will happen and who will be involved. We will also see how this educational program will prepare those on earth for the final test at the end of Christ's 1,000-year reign. So, the great educational program described at Daniel 12, 2 and 3.
Our goal now is to focus on and intensify our promotion of the pursuit of divine education.
Well, I mean, they make it sound so obvious. Let's have a quick look. Daniel chapter 12, verses 1, 2, and 3 says, "During that time Michael will stand up, the great prince, who is standing in behalf of your people. There will occur a time of distress, such as has not occurred since there came to be a nation until that time. And during that time your people will escape, everyone who is found written down in the book. And many of those asleep in the dust of the earth will wake up, some to everlasting life, and others to reproach and to everlasting contempt."
What did you mean by that?
Pass.
Perhaps if you could see it on a monitor.
Pass.
Really? No idea what that could mean?
Could it be education?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that obviously that is talking about a great educational program. It would be astounding that Watchtower even has to, tell us anymore. After you read that, you're pretty much good to go. All jokes aside, let us examine what exactly is going on here and how Watchtower is changing their doctrine. And I found this one to be very interesting because I think it might be a sign that we are moving away from the 1914-1919 sort of corner that they've backed their way into. I find it very interesting whenever there might be signs of changes to come, and usually, they come in the small increments before you get the real big whopper. So, hey, maybe I could just be speculating a little too hard. I'll let you decide. Drop a comment down below. Let me know what you think after we're all done here. First interesting thing in this article was just in the very first paragraph in the footnote. So they're describing the earthly resurrection. If you don't know what that is, you can refer to my previous video where I break that down. But in the footnote here, it says the resurrection may start with those who died faithful during the last days and then may proceed backward generation by generation. If this proves to be the case, each generation will have an opportunity to welcome back those who they had known personally. Whatever the case, the scriptures speak of a proper order with regard to the heavenly resurrection, and we can assume that the earthly resurrection will also be carried out in an orderly manner. I found this to be really funny just because we know anytime Watchtower uses the word generation, all of our little apostate ears kind of pop up like we're a Doberman, and we were just sitting there chilling, and all of a sudden, generation? Generation? What's going on? Oh my goodness, it's so funny. But yeah, apparently they do know what the definition of a generation is, and that's those, that were alive at any given time. But yeah, we get a revamp of the overlapping generations, as it will. So the joke that just keeps on giving. But with all of that, let's get into the real star of the show here. Okay, we are going to start in paragraph 4. So there it says, read Daniel 12:1, which we already did. The book of Daniel reveals the sequence of exciting events that will occur during the time of the end. For example, Daniel 12:1 reveals that Michael, who is Jesus Christ, no, we're not going to get into that on this video, is standing in behalf of God's people. That part of the prophecy began to be fulfilled in 1914, when Jesus was appointed as king of God's heavenly kingdom. However, Daniel was also told that Jesus would stand up during a time of distress, such as has not occurred since there came to be a nation until that time. This time of distress is the Great Tribulation, mentioned at Matthew 24:21. Jesus stands up or acts to defend God's people at the end of this time of distress, that is, Armageddon. The book of Revelation refers to these ones as a great crowd who come out of the Great Tribulation. Now, the whole purpose of this is, the whole Watchtower, these two articles, is showing the differences in how they've adjusted their teachings on these particular scriptures. And I found it fascinating that they didn't give any reference points to how this actually changed. They just said, yep, this is Daniel 12, Michael, he's Jesus, he stands up, that happened in 1914, and they move past that. Where when later on, when they talk about how they've adjusted their opinion, they actually give the references so people can look it up for themselves. So my brain always goes to, well, why wouldn't they want people looking this up for themselves?
And here we go.
Well, I'm pretty sure we can all guess exactly what's about to happen. So let us do that and go into the old Watchtower library and see how they used to describe these verses. So I found a good example, and that was in a 1951 Watchtower, 7-1, pages 400 to 408. It is a series of articles that deal specifically with this prophecy in Daniel, this quote-unquote prophecy in Daniel, and gives explanations to everything. Now, we're not going to go too deep into the crazy patch here, but just for reference, yes, they're consistent about the whole 1914 thing, the fact that Michael is Jesus. They actually explain it in this one, whereas they just say, nope, he's Jesus, don't worry about it. They actually give their explanation for that. And then we have in paragraph 11 of this article, it's probably on screen now, this portion. Though the statement pertaining to the time of trouble is brief, we should not understand that to indicate it is a very short time. We are bound to take into account the many other prophecies in the book of Daniel and elsewhere, in order to grasp how much is involved. Christ Jesus groups many such prophecies and enlarges on them when explaining to his disciples some of the things which must come to pass in the last days. He shows the beginning of this time and how the troubles increase, and mentions some of the sorrows to fall on the world during the time of trouble. The length of time is indicated by him when he said, "Truly I say to you that this generation will by no means pass away until all these things occur." The actual meaning of these words is, beyond question, that which takes a generation in the ordinary sense, as at Mark 8:12 and Acts 13:36, or for those who are living at the given period. So it was on this generation that the accumulated judgments were to fall. This therefore means that from 1914 a generation shall not pass till all is fulfilled, and amidst a great time of trouble.
That is one big pile of shit.
So this would be an adjustment in their thinking. What they previously taught was that this time of trouble that they were mentioning was the last days, beginning in 1914 when Jesus came into power. Now they've made an adjustment and said, no, this time of trouble that Daniel's talking about actually refers to the Great Tribulation, which is at some time in the future, we don't know when. So they take the very first sentence of Daniel 1, okay, Michael stands up, that's Jesus, so that's when he comes to power. Okay, so that happened in 1914 because that's part of our core doctrine. But this other thing, we need to make some changes to that. And I found it so interesting how they try to weasel their way out of this obvious lie that Watchtower told back then. They lied to the people that were following them. They didn't get it right. They said, it's beyond question, and a generation in the ordinary sense, the generation shall not pass until all is fulfilled. They were giving these definitive statements, and they all proved not to be true. So I found it really interesting how they don't give this reference, but I hope any Jehovah's Witness that is watching this video know that we found this just within the Watchtower library. No apostate material needed whatsoever. You can just open up your computer tab and go at it. And I suggest anytime you see a discrepancy like this with Watchtower, where they give you a reference for one thing and then they don't give you a reference for something else, there's usually something hiding in that little something else box over here that they just try to sneakily push to the side so that way no one can call them out on their bullshit about this generation teaching. Now that I got that out of my system, woo, that felt good. Let's jump back to it. So now we're in paragraph 6, where it says, read Daniel 12:2, which we did. What happens after the great crowd survive this time of distress? This prophecy is not referring to a symbolic resurrection, a spiritual revival of God's servants that occurs during the last days, as we previously understood. And then the footnote, this explanation is an adjustment to the understanding in the book, the Daniel's Prophecy book, and in a 1987 Watchtower, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Rather, these words refer to the resurrection of the dead that takes place in the coming new world. Why can we draw that conclusion? The expression the dust is also used at Job 17:16 as a parallel of the expression the grave. This fact indicates that Daniel 12:2 is referring to the literal resurrection that will occur after the last days have ended and after the Battle of Armageddon. So now we have the adjustment. So if we go back to the Daniel's Prophecy book and that 1987 Watchtower, we will find them explaining how, maybe I won't even have to put it on screen, how the resurrection it was speaking of in Daniel there was a spiritual thing. And the spiritual resurrection happened in 1919. So Jesus stands up in 1914, bada bing, bada boom, a few things happen. I don't know why it's not immediate. But then in 1919, once the directors of the Bible students of the Watchtower were released from prison, then that is when a resurrection occurred. A resurrection so that way people can now have spiritual food in these last days. And then a judgment that it mentions about the wicked ones. Sorry, I'm losing my place here. In verse 2, and many of those asleep in the dust of the earth will wake up, some to everlasting life, and others to reproach and to everlasting contempt. They explained away the everlasting contempt, that resurrection or waking up, as referring to those that would reject any new light that came out of Watchtower, people that didn't stick with the organization and their teachings, that rejected the truth. Those were the people that were resurrected into this everlasting contempt, and that's just how they explained it. Obviously, they have to change that now because they've changed so many things from back way back when and continue to make all these changes. They would sound rather foolish if they were to say, yep, and those were the people that didn't go with these original teachings of the truth. Well, that doesn't make us look very good, so obviously they don't want to have anything to do with that. So, all right, moving on to paragraph 7. What does Daniel 12:2 mean, though, when it says that some will be resurrected to everlasting life? It means that those who are resurrected and come to know or continue to know and obey Jehovah and Jesus during the 1,000-year reign will ultimately receive everlasting life. This will be a better resurrection than the one in the past that brought certain humans back to life. Why? Because those imperfect humans died again. but not all resurrected ones will accept Jehovah's educational program. Daniel's prophecy says that some will be resurrected to reproach and to everlasting contempt. Because they will show a rebellious spirit, their names will not be written in the book of life, and they will not receive everlasting life. Instead, they will receive everlasting contempt or destruction. So, Daniel 12:2 is speaking of the ultimate outcome for all resurrected ones based on what they do after their resurrection. Some will gain everlasting life, others will die. All right, let's break this down in very simple terms. If I tell you, I woke up to the dogs barking, and I woke up to a car alarm going off, would you conclude that I woke up just any given day and that 5 hours later, a week later, the dogs just started barking at a random time, had nothing to do with me waking up? Or that a car alarm just went off at any given unspecified time in the future during that week? Would you reasonably conclude, if I said, oh man, I woke up to the dogs barking and a car alarm going off, would you be in your right mind if you said, oh, so when did the car alarm go off? When did the dogs start barking? Even asking that question makes you sound just idiotic. And yet that's exactly what Watchtower is suggesting here. They wake up to this judgment. They woke up to it. Okay, bingo, bango, bongo, we're ready for action. But no, it's like, well, it's just going to be based off of something in the future. It makes absolutely no sense. And I know why they're doing it. It's because they have this core doctrine of there's going to be the resurrection of both the righteous and the unrighteous. And then when you have verses in the Bible like this one that clearly show that they're going to be judged on the spot, it goes against your idea of, well, they're going to have time to get to know Jehovah and be taught about him and undergo this grand plan of this education system. And it makes no sense biblically speaking, and this is the result and the fallout from them trying to come up with a way out. And what you end up doing is making these really silly definitions of words. They woke up to something. Well, I mean, they didn't wake up to that thing. They woke up, and then that thing happened 1,000 years later. If they wake up to, they either wake up to judgment or they don't wake up to judgment. So when they're resurrected, when they're resurrected, you can't. When you're resurrected, you either wake up to your judgment or you're not. You can't say anything else. You can't. Oh my goodness, I need some water. So, what are Watchtower leaders trying to accomplish? Because anytime we have a situation where they are manipulating and turning the dials a little bit on Watchtower doctrine, we must assume that because God is clearly not talking to these people, they're not getting this new light or going down the highway of holiness because of Holy Spirit from an omniscient, omnipotent, powerful spirit creature. We know that that is just demonstrably not the case. So then why are they doing this? I think that this might be the first tiny little step of moving themselves farther away from the whole 1919 thing. I wonder if that is going to be in the very near future, because every time they bring up 1919, I'm assuming Watchtower pees themselves just a little bit of sodden trousers here, because when they hear 1919, or when a Jehovah's Witness hears 1919, they're going to think about their history. And when they start thinking about their history, they might do something that will be detrimental to their faith. And that is research what was going on with the Watchtower back in 1919. What was Rutherford teaching? How did he come to power over after Pastor Russell died? What were some of the teachings and claims that he made? Wouldn't it be interesting to know? Watchtower's talking about 1919. I think it must be important. Therefore, I want to know a little bit more about it. And the more research they do into Rutherford, it is not a good look. Even if you just take into account Watchtower's own publications, not even bringing in any sort of apostate material, people will be blown away by the crazy things that that man said, and the predictions that he made, and how much of a horrible asshole he was. And you can do it just by looking at Watchtower publications. So I think a smart move by them is to try and distance themselves from this whole 1919 thing. And I wonder if this might be the first step. Maybe this is like, okay, we need to move ourselves from this because it's not working out very well, especially for Bethelites, because Bethelites have access to a much larger catalog of Watchtower material than an ordinary Jehovah's Witness does. So especially when it comes to Bethelites doing extra research, I don't think they want to be talking about 1919 that often. Can they ever move away from 1914 entirely? That one will be tricky, but whenever you start talking in the way that they have done in these two articles, I don't put anything past them. New light could literally just mean anything at all. And I hope you guys enjoyed sort of this breakdown of some of the new light that we got in this Watchtower. If you'd like to see me break down any other changes that do come about in Watchtower and my thoughts and opinions on it, please just let me know either in the comments below, send me an email, anything like that. I always enjoy hearing from you guys. With all of that being said, it is very hot in here and I'm going to change into a much cooler shirt. So don't forget to drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time. ZZ will probably see you next time. Sorry he wasn't around today. I didn't feel like censoring out his ass.